welcome to In This Corner, the podcast. I think we're at a buck 32. Boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments, sports entertainment at its best. Shall I go on? We do it all, and we do it with style and panache, and of course, boxing writer, author, CompuBox counter, historian, good guy, Lee Groves. How you doing, Lee?
I'm doing well, and I don't know if I'm breaking the rules by wearing white after Labor Day, but I don't really care.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was giving us, both of us, all of these titles, and the show all of these titles is kind of a perfect segue to me telling the folks who our guest is today. And this one's important to me because, man, I've known this dude for a long, long time. He has worked with so many remarkable athletes and teams for well over 40 years, sports performance manager and career extension specialist extraordinaire. Mackie Shilstone will join us shortly to talk about what won't be short. It has been a brilliant career, you know, working with the likes of Serena Williams and Peyton Manning. And of course, boxing, you fans should know him from his work with Michael Spinks or a Riddick Bowe or a Roy Jones Jr. I look forward to that, and I know you do as well. But before we get to that, let's get this pugilistic business, these recaps out of the way.
Right. In the main event of last weekend's DAZN card, Diego Pacheco retained his number one spot in the WBO at 168 by becoming the first man to stop Poland's Maciej Sulecki, thanks to a savage hook to the body in round 6. Now, with the win, he raised his record to 22-0 with 18 knockouts, but given the schedule of champion Canelo Alvarez, he's fighting Edgar Berlanga September 14th, maybe Bud Crawford next May, another fight the following September. I'm not sure Pacheco's going to get the chance to face Canelo in the ring. But since Pacheco's only 23 years old and Canelo's 34, he can afford to wait. And then on the undercard, Eduardo Nunez, the top-ranked lightweight in the IBF, ultimately joined Vasily Lomachenko as the two men who have stopped Miguel Marriaga. But along the way, he tasted some flush power shots from the 37-year-old. He shook off those blows. He scored a pair of knockdowns. He stopped him in round 6. He raised his record to 28-1 with 28 knockouts. And he's set to meet the winner of the September 21st fight between IBF champion Anthony Cacace and former featherweight king Josh Warrington. Nunez has talent, he has heavy hands, but he's got some holes in his game. Now, last week I predicted that the women's fight between champion Adelaida Ruiz and challenger Jenny Fuchs for the WBC secondary 115-pound title would be the night's most competitive contest, and it certainly was. The two traded at a brisk pace for all 10 rounds, but Fuchs's sharper and heavier shots earned her the unanimous decision victory. And finally, earlier this morning, as we tape, Tuesday, ESPN Plus streamed a world title doubleheader. And in the first fight, WBO bantamweight champion Yoshiki Takai survived a strong challenge, a cut over the left eye, and a questionable 11th round knockdown from former WBC flyweight champion Daigo Higa. He rallied strongly in the 12th round, and he won a razor-close unanimous decision. And in the main event, Naoya Inoue retained his undisputed super bantamweight championship for the second time with a 7th round TKO against former titleist TJ Doheny. The first 5 rounds were rather cat and mouse, and during this period, Doheny acquitted himself quite well. But once Inoue started turning on the jets, late in round 5, he began to assert his dominance. At the end of round 6, Doheny might have tweaked something in his lower back, and though he answered the bell for round 7, he determined he couldn't go on. He waved his glove, he turned his back, he limped along the ropes, and the fight was over. And with the win, Inoue raised his record in widely recognized world title fights to a staggering 21-0 with 19 knockouts. And in terms of who's next, Bob Arum said that Inoue will fight at the end of the year. My guess will be December 31st, since that's a traditional boxing date in Japan. And then there will be a, quote, big celebration in 2025. Now, as to who he will fight, three names come to mind. Sam Goodman of Australia, who is the mandatory challenger in both the IBF and WBO, Murajan Akhmadaliev, the #1 man in the WBA, and Junto Nakatani, the current WBC bantamweight champion, who I think will provide the sternest challenge to Inoue. What are your thoughts on Inoue, his performance, and his future?
He's a monster. I don't think he's a complete monster because I see a lot of, how do I say it and make sense to, these boxing people that will go crazy. He's got, he has a lot of, he has flaws. He gets hit way too much. But what I love about him is what creates a lot of those flaws. I mean, he goes for it when as you appropriately said, when he turns on those jets and goes for it, he kind of doesn't think defense at all. And I think there's a way to transition into that with proper defense. And this is just, the older, more educated Smitty saying this. But Sugar Ray Robinson, when he went for it, he would get hit as well. I think he's a wonderful physical and athletic specimen. I think he's an all-time great for Japan. Maybe their best ever. Do I think he's #1? We could call him #1 because of what he's doing and how he's doing it. I think Crawford's a more complete fighter than he is. I think Usyk is a more complete fighter than he is. But what he is special, and he is a monster, and we'll see what the future, holds for him. You might just be starting, and this kind of sounds crazy, but he might be right up there and getting ready to level out and come down. We'll see. We'll have plenty of time to talk more about the monster, but when we come back, a guy that if Inoue were to get in a situation where he wants to extend that career because he's slowing down and because he's losing some of this or losing some of that, boy, I know who I would have him call. Our next guest, Mackie Shilstone. Back with Mackie right after this.
I got two options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Welcome back to In This Corner, the podcast. Buck 32, boxing's biggest names, biggest stories, biggest fights, greatest memories and moments, sports entertainment at its best with a twist. And this one just makes me smile, our special guest today, because he is as good as there is and has ever been when it comes to sports performance management, and we'll add career extension specialist to that. I first had him on with me. I'm talking about, we're going back to the 80s when I was doing radio in Fort Myers, Florida, and he is Mackie Shilstone. Great to see you again, Mackie.
Well, Smitty, it's like pulling back from yesteryear. We were down there training on the beaches down there. I forget, it was Michael Spinks. It was for the light heavyweight light heavyweight fights. And that's where I first met you, I think.
Well, I started having you on the radio program because I had followed you working with individuals and teams. And every time I would read about you and hear you speak, I said, this guy is fantastic. And we'll get into this, but not just with what he does physically, but also what he does. He's kind of like a psychologist and a psychiatrist as well. But I want to go back for the people who, because of course we're going to talk about Serena and Peyton and Michael Spinks and Roy Jones, but let's go back to the embryonic stages where it all began for Mackie Shilstone, your childhood, and you can bring us up into when you got into this career that you've excelled in, if you don't mind. Go back, take us back to childhood.
Well, I got to tell you, Smitty, there's interesting story to that. And I'm truly honored that you would take me and the cadre of people, the notables that you've had. My interesting story was that my father was highly decorated in combat in World War II. I have many of his medals down there. Both the Japanese and the Germans. Went to military school ever since the age of 11. He did. And graduated from Tulane and Chemical Engineering School. And he was born in 1912. The way this is relevant, because some of this changed my entire life when I would become of more mature age. My father went to school in Germany before the war, graduate school, right when Hitler was coming to power. In fact, he met my mother in Heidelberg University when she was a senior, University of Missouri journalism. And at Heidelberg University, the students had to wear the SS uniform without insignias. Now, here was my father, a graduate of Tulane University, chemical engineering, someone who went to military school, high school, ever since he was 11 years of age, and then would meet my mother in Germany before the war, well before the war, and as a graduate student, and she's thinking he's a German officer because he spoke German. The war breaks out, and he goes in as a captain, a company commander, 94 Chemical Mortar Battalion, and he fought the Japanese in the China-Burma-India theater. And that's relevant because he created the technology to destroy Japanese pillboxes. And he always saw the enemy first. He always ate what they ate, did what they did, he led troops by example, which would later be the profound effect for me. And then he was pulled back. D-Day had occurred. Patton came in after D-Day, his Third Army, and my father, because my father had a unit that was chemical mortars, flamethrowers, and could fight as infantry. He was put out in front of Patton's tanks because Patton wanted to move very quickly through Germany. Well, my father said, son, I was more afraid of Patton than I was the Germans. But something that changed my life, and I didn't know until I was 58 years of age, and it's probably the reason why I would take on the challenges that no one else would, was because my uncle, who was younger, he's passed away now, was at West Point and had graduated when World War II had ended in 1945. My father had just come out. When the war was over, he had killed a lot of people, both by bombardment and by his own hand. And my father and I, it was very hard for me as an only child living through the things that I experienced. My father was the bravest man I ever knew. He never touched me, meaning he never laid a hand on me. But I can tell you that post-traumatic stress syndrome is alive and well. And these brave men and women then, it wasn't even around. And I know that now because I volunteer my time for Delta Force out of Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, and have been doing that since 2018. And I say that because my uncle told my father, asked my father, he was going to combat in the Korean War. He turns to him, and my father's name was Cecil. He says, Cecil, what's it like? You were up in the front. You saw the enemy first. And my uncle was named Jimmy, the younger one. And he turned to Jimmy. He says, Jimmy, I'm going to tell you only one thing. He said, it was the Battle of the Bulge. Germans were mounting a counteroffensive. We were doing a counteroffensive. I had just blown this town apart. I was moving in. I was ordered to move in and take the town. And he said, I'm going to tell you one thing. He said, I was clearing a house. I was going in. He said, I moved into a room the same time as a German. In other words, he looked him in the eye, inside a room. And my father says, it was him or me. Luckily, I shot first. And when I learned that after my father had long passed away, which happened ironically in 1989, and I was working for the San Francisco Giants. In fact, I was stretching the starting pitcher in the World Series when the earthquake hit. And it flashed before my eyes because I finally understood my father and all of the things that I'd seen and been through. When my father would apologize to me after the number of people he killed, it was only one person that affected his entire life. And that was that one kill inside that room where he was alone in a room with another person. And I realized at 58 years of age why I was on this planet, why I was given the gift that I was given as the who had overcome all personal odds myself. In other words, I wanted to try football. I walked on at Tulane as the smallest person in college history at the time, and I earned a varsity letter. And during that time, when I was at Tulane, we didn't have a weight room. So I built a weight room in the back of my house across the street from the stadium. And the team would come over and work out in my gym. And then in Super Bowl IX, the Steelers are in town. I had the same equipment as the Steelers. Louis Rickey, the strength coach, brought him to my backyard gym to work out because I'm across the street from the stadium. 2 weeks later, Arnold Schwarzenegger's in my gym because he's in town talking about pumping iron for his book. And later I would know Arnold Schwarzenegger because I worked on Terminator in the movie 2019. James Cameron called me. So it's amazing how life changes, and 3,000 athletes and going up against decided odds. I said, there's no excuse for me to let anything overcome me, no matter what my size, what my lack of ability. I will outthink them, outsmart them, outtrain them, outstudy them, and so will the people I work with.
So it seems to me like what you're saying is, in a way, this was your destiny.
I as a 73-year-old man, I would say it has been a destiny, because you ask yourself, on September 21st, 1985, when Michael Spinks made history, my life changed. I come home and got calls from Dustin Hoffman and everybody under the sun.
Smitty and Dustin Hoffman call you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a destiny. And I often tell my sons, I said, I'm not from this planet.
Yeah. Well, Lee has a lot of specifics that I know the fans will want to get to. So I'll toss it to Lee Groves.
Well, the first time many boxing fans heard of you was that fight in September 1985 when undisputed light heavyweight champion Michael Spinks challenged IBF heavyweight champion Larry Holmes. Now, you had worked with Spinks before in order to have him reduced to 175, but here you had to reshape his body not only to fight at heavyweight, but do so without losing speed, flexibility, or endurance. And here's what's amazing beyond the fact that Spinks ended up winning the fight. Not only did you achieve these goals, but even after adding 25 pounds to his frame, you reduced his body fat from 9.1% to 7.2%. As briefly as you can, how did you work that miracle?
Well, it's interestingly you say that, because you're right. I was brought into his camp by a man named Don Hubbard, who was owned part of Spinks's Butch Lewis and Hubbard. They really own the contract for Michael Spinks. I had helped Don and his wife when I was managing a foundation, eye disease foundation, and changed him. And 3 days later, he says, I think you can help my fighter. He's the he's a light heavyweight champion, Olympic gold medalist, Michael Spinks, who actually won the fight, the middleweight medal.
165.
And so I'm in the Catskill Mountains at the Grossingers, where they film Dirty Dancing, and I'm paid $75 a day, and my job was to take this 182-3-pound man who had been wearing army boots running on the beach, putting Vicks salve on the walls of the bathroom to create heat, rubber suits. And I went in there, and one of the, I'm a student of physiology, and I said, why are you sweating? Why are you not drinking water, spitting in a cup, doing all this? I said, all I want you to do, and forget all the training we did, I want you to simply drink water regularly. He says, what? And I said, yeah. I said, the kidneys produce an antidiuretic hormone. Your hormones have been produced, and so you're holding on to a lot of water. I said, we start drinking adequate hydration, which is 1 ounce of water per pound of body weight with the training we would do. And miraculously, the weight was coming off. Well, they thought I was just, here I'd come like Captain Kirk back to another dimension, and he lands on the thing and he says, oh, by the way, do this. That's what we do 200 years from now, So I felt like Captain Kirk, and then the rest was training and working together. And Michael developed this immense trust that I would always take care of him. And where does that come from? It comes back from my father. It comes back from the fact, eat what your troops eat, except I eat my way. And then train with them. So I made them train my way. So what I did was I just made these athletes become my training partner, and I became them. I became a chameleon and took over the eating. Designed all the meals. This was before there were any strength coaches, before their performance was a word I introduced umpteen years ago. It didn't exist. There was no dietitians that even knew performance. So everything that you may think I am, I'm none of those. But I had to take a situation, and I didn't really understand what I was until I saw a movie where this guy in Hollywood, I forget his name, was a fixer. And he would fix all the problems for the Hollywood producers. Go out and kill this person and bury him, or go do this and that. He fixed all the problems. Well, I haven't started burying bodies yet, but I fix performance problems, and nothing is limiting me. I'm not a dietitian. I'm not a strength coach. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not a certified athletic trainer. I'm not this. I'm not that. I'm not that. But I know how to manage them all, and I know how to get in the game and do it all, because I made a decision 43 years ago. I would read technical journals 5 days a week, every morning, whether I started out with research papers before the internet, and it extended. And to this day, this morning, I read tech journals. So
Yep.
I'm going to do things no one else will do, whether it's my diet, which is stringent, whether it's my exercise, which is enough to kill a 73-year-old man, or whatever it is. I don't want to live forever. I want compressed morbidity, the shortest period of illness pushed late in your life. So I want quality of life. I don't necessarily want to live forever. And
Right.
I imparted that to each person.
Before you continue, Lee, because it just sounds like so much, and I know I've done it in interviewing so many greats and these 65 great fighters that have shared the ring with me, who was just a 4-round club fighter. Trust. It seems to me that everything you've done, whether it be Serena or Peyton or Spinks or Roy or Riddick, or you must get the trust of these athletes like nobody else, no other coach or anybody they've ever dealt with. How important is that word trust, that they buy into you and then you do your deal?
Well, it's everything. And my motto is, don't do as I say, necessarily do as I do. When we're going to run together. And I will basically, everybody I get is either broken or scared or having to go climb a mountain. And so I would tell them, I said, on D-Day, Omaha Beach, I've helped Army Rangers. Army Rangers tasked was to go up to Point Lahawk and silence the German guns that had been the French guns. 250 Rangers scaled that. The Germans were shooting down at them. 75 survived. They did the job. They shut down the German guns. That's me in a non-heroic way. My job is, here's a dark cavern. Here's a dark cave. We're going to go in that cave. They're down there at the end is the light. We're going to stay on a path. I will lead you. I will guide you. And then I'll be there with you. You'll have to go in and get the job done, but I will lead you and give you what you need to do it. And that's what I've lived by personally. And that's what I believe my over 3,000 basketball, you name it, clients that I've been blessed to help.
We are chatting with Mackie Shilstone, sports performance manager, and I love the career extension specialist, and some of these specifics Lee Groves will continue to get into. Go ahead, Lee.
Well, you have worked with more than 3,000 athletes, and I'd like to sort of play a game of association concerning several of these athletes. Could you give me a brief sketch of them as people and as clients? Let's start with Michael Spinks.
Well, you know what? Michael Spinks was interesting. We still talk. I actually had him talk to two of my Rangers before they were going to Best Ranger competition. You know what's interesting about Michael? We started working together, and we would be training in light heavyweight, and I had some stringent rules. And I would go in. We could be at the Concord, the Catskill Mountains, or wherever we were. And I'd go in and I'd check his room, and I'd look under his bed, and there was this box of candy. And I'd look at him and I'd say, he says, Mac, I just got to know it's there. He says, when the fight is over, I'll take some. Do you know he never took it ever after the fight? And I think the idea with Michael was, I was his protectorate, because I will tell you, Lee, when we were going to fight Larry Holmes, who was, well, he at one point was what, 265, 275, and we were gonna fight at 200. I told Michael, I said, Michael, I'm gonna tell you a story. I said, David and Goliath. I said, you go back in history and you read the story, and then you look at technology. David saw something coming down. He saw that Goliath would come down sideways and literally would walk down in a slant and a slant and a slant. And David was sitting down there, and he had this sling. And he realized, and science is backing this up, the perception is that Goliath had lost peripheral vision, and he couldn't see sideways. So David always stayed to his side. And when he hurled that stone, I would tell Michael, I said, Michael, you know what that stone is? And he called me Mac Man. He said, no. What are you talking about? I said, that stone is knowledge. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply it. And you see, David in the story hurled that stone. Goliath goes down. Then he goes and takes Goliath's sword, big thing, and cuts Goliath's head off. And for the fight against Holmes, I sensed real fear in Michael. And there's some stories on YouTube, in fact, you may have seen them, of Michael and I running together. And what was fascinating, Michael was always trying to beat me. And this is 2 days before the fight. We're on out there where you are, Smitty, the UNLV campus, where I run that track more times than I can count. And we're on the track. And Michael and I would run sprints. See, everybody, I knew that Holmes was going to be running distance, so I knew he was going to be back on his heels. So we did the first time, and Angelo Dundee laughed at me. Even Sugar Ray laughed at me on the air. Later, he told me he thought we were going to win. But I said, Michael, we're running sprints. I said, a round is equivalent to 880 yards. We're going to run that thing in 3 minutes, and we're going to take a 1 minute break. And I said, then we're going to run 1320s. We're going to go over the distance of it. And then we're going to go down the 1660s under. And I said, because you will fight at different levels. And then we're going to jump off these boxes because I'm going to increase pain in your legs. And it was the day, 2 days before the fight. And I said, Michael says, you want to race? I said, Michael, you know, I'm going to kill you. And I said, but I don't want you to pull a hamstring. And so it was wet on the track. We run the 100. I slipped down, and Michael wins by a hair. You would have thought he won the world heavyweight title fight. I thought, oh Jesus, it's all over now. I said, he's giving it all on this run. And he said, when I knew I could beat you, he said, I knew I could win. And then he goes in, he defeats Holmes, he comes out, and he tells me in the locker room, he says, you know those boxes? Home worked me into the corner, hit me, my legs came out, and jumping on those metrics, which is power, explosive power. He says, all of a sudden my legs came up and I hit him, backed up. And I said, and then Michael, we took him for a run, sprint intervals. We just ran around him, much like a P-51 Mustang going after a German. I mean, we were circling him and taking him down and hitting him and pounding him. And Michael said, you know, Matt, running with you was harder than this fight. Mm. And I said, Michael, you know what? I told you I'd have you live it. And while you're living it, you knew you could survive it. Mm-hmm. He said, we did.
Yeah. What about Peyton Manning? Peyton Manning's a completely different kind of guy, very cerebral, very intelligent, but also very teachable, right?
Well, in fact, actually, Peyton is what I call a mechanic.
Yeah.
I had known Peyton when he was a little boy. I had helped Archie. I was a wide receiver, and Tulane and the Saints would get together and throw, and Archie used to throw passes to me. Just reached out to me the day. The kids were young. He had asked me to help Peyton, and I forget who I was tied up with at the time. I had helped Eli. Eli came into my sports academy for kids when he was at Newman High School in New Orleans, where I live. It was later in life. Peyton was in the 16th year. He had, well, this is common knowledge, or I wouldn't say it, multiple cervical surgeries. Right. He had knee surgeries. He just torn a rectus. I called Archie. I for 21 years worked for the Commissioner's Office of Major League Baseball. I went in and tested the umpires. I was the only man that ever tested all the umpires on the field. They had to pass me. I never lost one. And then they would come to me in the during the season if they were injured for reinstatement. I was down there. And I reached to Archie just for no other reason to say, hey, look, I feel real bad that I didn't help Peyton at the time when he was younger, but I'm sure he didn't need me. And I said, I'm sure he's at a crossroads now. I said, tell him I'll just do this for him. Well, I never expected to hear from him. Well, a week later, I'm on the field testing the umpires, and this Peyton calls me. He says, my dad told me what you said. He says, you think you can help me? I said, what do you want me to do? He says, I want to find out if I can do the next year. I've got to go back and sign my contract. I said, I tell you what, Peyton, I'm going to tell you what I tell everybody. And I told it to Linda Hamilton before the most recent Terminator movie in 2019. I said, you're going to go through the most extensive medical you've ever gone through in your life, more so than your team will ever do. I said, I'm going to find out everything about you. Number one, I don't want you dropping dead on me. That would be embarrassing to me. Number two, I said, you're going to have to survive 3 weeks with me. If you can do that, then we can make this happen. Well, he comes in, he does that. We go back and we work out at his high school where I was working at Newman Field. And so it's the end of 3 weeks on the Newman Field. Which is where Archie and Eli, I mean, not Archie, but Eli and Cooper and all the rest of them played. There's a cross. It's at the end of the field, and the far end, right on the side of the cross, is the kindergarten, and then on this side is the high school, and then on this side is the lower school, and this big nice turf field that the Mannings had donated to the school. And he looks down, and he's 6'5", and I'm 5'8", looks down at me. He says, Mackie, you think I can do this? I looked up at him. I said, Peyton, you see that cross up there right there? As sure as that cross is there, we can do this. But just like that cross of trials and tribulations, I said, I see we're going to have some trouble, but we will get through it. We will find a way. And we went on. I worked with him for that month, sent him back into the Broncos training camp. He signed that contract to do that year. During the course of the time, we dealt with a partially torn plantar fascia, and we dealt with it, custom orthotics. I did everything. I set up all his meals. I set up all of his guidelines, my nutritionist, my dietitian. I originally put in physical therapy to correct the quad. I used training I used from the National Hockey League. I worked for the St. Louis Blues for 10 years. I used every trick in the book. And, you know, when Peyton and that great defense won that Super Bowl, he sent me a picture and he said only one thing. And Smitty, this comes to what you asked. And he's holding it up. And that was his second Super Bowl. And he really wanted to do it by his little brother. And because money wasn't an issue, fame wasn't an issue, he says, thank you for your friendship. And the other thing, we used Denver Bronco balls. And we would be throwing, I was a receiver, so I'd get at the break point, I'd put him on a balance beam because I had to teach him how to throw with his hip and not his shoulder. And because the neck had affected which is why he wore the glove. And so we did that. And I was having him throwing off a balance beam. So if he fell, he'd fall and hit he'd have to catch himself. And when it was over, he said, you want one of these balls? You want me to sign one? I said, no. I said, I would like to have one of the balls. And hold on for a second.
This ought to be interesting.
Here it is. Here's the Broncos ball.
Yep.
You don't see any signature on it.
No.
And you want to know why? Because
Why?
I said, the minute you sign this, I become a fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of any sport. To me, in certain cases, it can be a life or death situation. And if I counted the number of these I have, I can't tell you how many.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep going, Lee. I know you have some others.
Who were the clients that particularly impressed you with their capacity for work?
Well, I'll tell you, interesting enough, Serena Williams is an interesting story because we spent 14 years together. I went through the early years with the Richard Williams. I started with her in 2007 and then went through the end, which was 2 years ago. She was just in town, by the way, for the Essence Festival. I saw her. And what was interesting, the way and Smitty, both of you would appreciate this. Well, you know Rock Newman, the promoter for Riddick Bowe.
Yes.
Rock Newman was the publicist for Michael Spinks, Smitty. You remember that?
Oh, yes.
Well, Rock Newman was friends, and you'll know this too, with Cora Berry. You know, Cora Berry was the commissioner for the Washington, D.C. Boxing Commission. Cora Berry happens to be Serena's mother, Orson Price's best friend. So Serena was facing the loss of her sister to gunshot violence, and Rock suggested to Cora to tell Oracine, you really need to send her to Mackie. And I had helped Ken Flack, the Wimbledon's doubles champion years before, and I had helped Leslie Allen, who went on to become the WTA president. And so I get a call from Serena's mother, and I talked to her. She's a nurse, so we really hit it off. And then I talked to Richard, never met him, and it was fascinating. All of a sudden, I get a call from Serena. She's in Australia, and she had lost in, I think, the second round of the tournament. She says, "Can I come in and see you?" Well, it's during Mardi Gras. I said, "Yeah, I'll get a hotel close outside of the Mardi Gras. I'll put you at the Hilton, and I'll take care of it and come in." Well, she comes in. She comes with a friend because she was so tired, jet lagged, and we're sitting down. And you probably saw this in the documentary that on her. And I'm sitting there, and I say to her, "You know, Serena, I'm going to tell you something. The same old thing. You know, you have to go through all my medical. You're going to try and survive me. And if we can work." But I said, "Serena, you know, my reputation now is made. The only person that's going to ruin it is me. And I think it's important to understand something. I'm not a yes man. I'm going to be there. I'm going to tell you things that you may not want to hear. And if you want to fire me, cut me out anytime, do it. I don't care. You know, I'm going to go on and be just fine. The thousands behind me, I don't need to look back anymore." And she said, "Fine." So she goes through everything. I said, before we went on and had lunch, and then later, next day I put her on a plane to go back to Florida where she was living. I said, "Serena, I'm going to need to see some film or something of you. I need to see film of you at your best." And she scratches her head, looks at me, she says, "Mackie, I don't have it." I said, "What? You got to have film." She says, "Mackie, I've never been at my best." I said, "Well, maybe we can do something about that." Well, we went through a lot, and it was in the documentary. We went through torn tendons in the foot twice, a pitcher that tore a tendon, knocked out 3 months, and then a re-tear. And then we went through 2 pulmonary embolisms. I went through pregnancy, postpartum pregnancy, you know, the whole bit. I said, "Serena, you know, I never thought this would be my defining moment." And it occurred, of all things, when she and Alexis, her husband, or future husband at the time, said, "We would much like you to be the officiant for our wedding." Well, me, I don't know if I can. She's right there, you know, right there on back of me. She's always watching me, but she's afraid of me, you see.
Really?
And I don't know if I can beat that. So even though Meghan Markle, who was her friend, who I saw at the U.S. Open when she was Her Highness, and I used to know her when she was Meghan. I said, "Meghan, you know I might marry Serena." And she said, "Yeah, Mackie, and when we repeat our vows, I want you to come do them." I said, "You got that." But I said, "I'm done after that."
You know, you are. I heard something a few times, and I use it when I do my motivational speaking. This thing I love, and where use an obstacle as an inspiration, and it seems as though you and she's such a great example. By the way, folks, In the Arena with Serena, it's on ESPN, I know, Plus. Episode 4 features Mackie. It's riveting. It's phenomenal. But it seemed like she came into your life where you'd already done all of this with all of these athletes. Then you get her, and she might end up being, you know, maybe the greatest testament to Mackie Shilstone. When I think of everything you've helped her endure and overcome in not just athletics, but in life, that she might be your greatest accomplishment, really.
Well, you know, I want to say this, Smitty. You saw the documentary. I came in as a team.
Yeah.
You know, my father had a unit. I've got a team. I believe in the team. I do my job. You know better than anybody that when I came into a boxing camp, I'm not telling Eddie Futch how to box. I'm coming in there and say, Mr. Futch, I want to make Mr. Michael, or I want to make Riddick better. You tell me what you need me to do and I'll do it. And I've been with so many world champion boxing coaches, and my job was simple. I'm going to deliver you a skill enhanceable product that doesn't tire out.
Yeah. Well, I call fighters the most common and uncommon of all athletes, that I've dealt with in my career. I started out as a little ball boy for a pretty good team, the 1972 Miami Dolphins, and I end up doing all of this stuff. And I call them, again, the most common and uncommon of all athletes, since our audience primarily are boxing fans and experts. What separates great prize fighters like a Riddick Bowe, a Roy Jones, a Michael Spinks? What separates them from the other athletes, in your opinion? How would you categorize them differently than other athletes, fighters?
That's easy. I read paragraph 7 of the boxing contract. It specifies if your opponent dies in the ring, you don't go to jail. However, if you have a battle outside the ring, then charges can be filed, such as the Bo Galata fight, where I was at that riot. And I learned a long time ago. I got to fly with the F-15 pilots because I trained them. I actually got to fly the F-15 like Tom Cruise did from the back seat, because I always do what they do. One of the interesting things about the boxing ring, which is what, 20 by 20 ring, okay? Inside that is a theater of operation. A theater is battle. And on that side is the opponent, the Ukrainians, and on this side are the Russians. And in that center is the referee. That's the Geneva Convention. But like every fighter's ever told me, if I get, Larry Holmes hit Michael below the belt when Holmes was being beaten by Michael. So Holmes had a point taken off, but Michael had to come back and hit him below the belt and get a point taken off to equal the pain. So you're got two men and now women coming together with a Geneva Convention that is perennially violated, and they do battle where if one of them kills the other, such as like when I had Andre Ward facing Kovalev, who had killed that guy in 2011 after he got out of the ring and died of a brain hemorrhage. I trained my fighters. I said, we're going to go in and we're going to train to kill the opponent. We're going to go in literally to kill them. And I said to myself, that's like my father waking up every morning in combat and saying, well, how many am I going to kill today? Which is the truth of everyone, not just my father, but everyone. So how am I going to go kill this man today? Because if I can, my guy survives. And I have literally taken that tack. And I will tell you, when we went in Bo Holyfield 3, I helped Bo to win the title. Then I separated from him, got lazy, and he lost to Holyfield. They came back to me. We broke Holyfield's ribs because I wanted to do it. When Roy Jones faced Ruiz, behind me, you might see that poster there. I specifically trained to break his nose because Holyfield had done it when Ruiz took the title from him. And you ask, why did I specifically do research, talk to oral and maxillofacial surgeons, prepare the training sideways on how to re-break the nose? Because both of you know the mouthpiece, and I know physiologically, allows you to write down and you get more powerful. In fact, any of your listeners or readers or viewers out there that want to get stronger, take 2 tongue depressors, tape them on the end, put them in the back of your mouth, bite down, and try for your max bench press. And you're gonna set it, a new one. I knew that. So if I could go in there and break the nose again, you will force the opponent to open his mouth because he's got to breathe through the mouth. And we did that. And I said it on HBO before, we're going to break his nose. I didn't say why. And we're going to re-break his nose. In round 6, we broke his nose.
Well, this is why you don't play boxing.
No, you don't.
Ladies and gentlemen. You know, Mackie, you kind of touched on it right from the get-go with that tremendous dissertation you did there about your father, who I can tell you still is so prominent every day with you. What have you learned about yourself during all of this with these 3,000 athletes and teams? And what have you learned about yourself?
Train like you fight and fight like you train and live it. And the problem is, Smitty, I go in and have my annual physical, same doctor. And I tell him, I said, I don't eat red meat. I don't eat fried foods. I haven't had pasta. I haven't had red meat in 44 years. I've been married 44 years. I haven't had pasta in over a decade. I don't smoke. I never smoked. I train 6 days a week since I was 16 years of age. At 5 feet 8 and 143 pounds, the only way that I would get anyone to respect me is if I lived it down the line and never violated my own rules. And the fighters or athletes would say, when they wouldn't want to do it, and I'll tell you a story about Serena that's funny, but it's fascinating. I would say, they would say, Mackie, we can't say a word. You're right there with us. You're beating us. We can't tell you we're tired. So Serena and I are running sprints. And I came up with this sprint called the Mackie Short Shuttle. So here's what it is. The ball has to be in play in theory, and now it's being held to it for gambling. Gambling is taking over sports, as you know. But the ball's got to be in play. So you're going to serve and then volley, get it back, serve every 20 seconds. You got 1:30 in the changeover. And depending on the network, between 2 and 3 minutes, closer to 3, between the sets. So I came up with a shuttle that I use for my NFL guys called the Mackie Short Shuttle. So think of it this way. Here's 50 yards. You're going to run 50 yards down, 50 yards back. So that's a total of 100 yards, but 50 yards down, 50 yards back, 19 seconds recovery. You'll do 6 of those. You'll take a 2-minute break. Well, that's at 20 seconds. There's that 2-minute break. Then you're going to run 40 yards down, 40 yards back, and you're going to do that 8 times. You're going to do it in 16 seconds with 16 seconds recovery between. You'll get a 2-minute break. Then you're going to run 30 yards down, 30 yards back in 12 seconds. And with 12 seconds recovery, you do 10. You get a 2-minute break. Then you're going to run 20 yards down, 20 yards back in 10 seconds. With 10 seconds recovery, you're going to do 12 of them. It's a total of lengths, each one being a length, 72. So we're on the field. We just finished practice. And I tell Serena, we're going to run my short shuttle I've come up with. And, okay, Mac, okay. So we loosen up. We start running. Well, I had just turned 65. I had my Medicare card. It was in my wallet. And right on the grass was a bag, and had my wallet and had, Serena's stuff in her purse and all that, and water and all that. So we're running down. We get to number 60. And she's not recovered after the 2 minutes. And I said, what's wrong? She said, I can't do anymore. I went over and got my Medicare card out. I held it up and I said, you mean Medicare, Mackie? I threw it around. I said, I'm going to finish up. I finished up and I said, you should be embarrassed. You should really be embarrassed. Well, later on, we're at the Wimbledon and I'm sitting in the locker room, and she had just won the singles title. And now she's got to get ready to go do the doubles. And she walks past me and she says, those damn sprints. So, it's, you got to do it. If I can't do it, well, to me, I'm 73 and I'm really not looking other than to help my special operatives. And my son is taking over from me now doing it. Why would you listen to a 73-year-old man? Sure, behind me are thousands of stories and thousands of successes, if you want to call them. But I'm 73. I got white hair. But if I go out and run you down and gun you down,
Yeah.
I can't tell you who I have embarrassed. I beat down Hopkins. I took Hopkins. We're Tulane University. I had 26 NFL punters and kickers. In fact, I worked with J.C. Elam before he tied Tom Dempsey. My guys held records. Morton Anderson still holds records. I had him for 17 years. So we're on the Tulane field. The football field is out there, and the kickers are messing around. And I turned to him, and this is a true story. I said, "Man, you suck. You're going to be doing this?" And Hopkins turns to me, "We're on my field now." And he says, "You can't talk to them like that." And I said to him, "Who the hell do you think you are? You're on my turf. What do you want to do? You want to hit me? I'll see. You already took over cell block D. You're trying to take over the one down. I will prosecute you. So here's what we're going to do." I said, "You're going to follow me now, son." And I was 17 years older. And there were people in the stands. And the field, the students cleared up. I said, "We're going to run the Mackie long shot."
Uh-oh.
And I said, "We're going to do a round. Goal line to 5 to end line, to 25 to goal line, to 50 to goal line, to other 25 to goal line, to goal line, to goal line, to end line, to end line, under 3 minutes and 15 seconds. You got a 3-minute break." So we do that. Here we come, ready to go again. He falls out in the middle of the second one. This is before the Tarver fight. And the people up there, and I said, "Why don't you tell your fans up there what a loser you are? Why don't you tell them that you failed to a 17 years older? You make me sick. Don't ever try and come down on me again. And you may want to hit me. You'll never leave the city alive." And you know what? He never opened his mouth to me again. But you see, Smitty, if I can't back it up, what am I?
Yeah. Yeah, well said. There's so many other things that I want to, that I have a whole list of other questions. So does Lee.
I do too.
But we're out of time. But I'm sure when I ask you back on again in the future, you've got one more Smitty interview in you, I hope.
Oh, I do. But I don't mean to burn up your time. I hope I didn't bore everybody.
Are you kidding me?
No.
No, it's fascinating. Listen, I saw something, and I'm a little younger than you. I'm 65 now. I have that that card coming as well. But I remember, I saw it in different athletes and different broadcasters. I saw it in Diamond Dallas Page. You know that, Lee, who I got into wrestling, and he's doing so much with yoga. But I saw something in you way back. You were a little older than me. I said, this guy, there's all these damn strength and conditioning guys and this, but this guy is something special because he taps in not only to this, but to this and to this. It all works, and that's what you've done and excelled in, perhaps better than anybody that's ever done it. And it's great I wish I'd get a chance to hang out with you more, but it's great to have you on, and we certainly will pick up where we leave off here in the very near future, Mackie.
Can I give you, and it's been a blessing truly to be on your show with you and Lee. Can I give you the website where people
Absolutely.
Sure.
People can get 126 of my columns. I used to analyze injuries for the Washington Post and whatever. And then you'll see my CBS affiliate 4-minute video.
And you've done a lot of books too. You had 5, 6, 7 books out, didn't you?
Right, but you can really go to Mackie is from Maxwell, so it's my son's site where all my stuff is. You can see up on the masthead. It's Maxwell, MAXWELL nutrition, NUTRITION.com, MaxwellNutrition.com. They can download free of charge. They can get over like 200 recipes, healthy recipes. 126 columns on wellness. more 4-minute exercise videos than I care to count.
Sports performance manager and career extension specialist extraordinaire. He is Mackie Shilstone. We are pretty much flat out of time. Next week on the program, ladies and gentlemen, it's Canelo versus Berlanga. We will assemble our team. Tommy Yankello will be with us. And as will another person from New Orleans, Regis Prograis, of course, will be on the program to help us break down Canelo's next venture. Lee Groves, Mackie Shilstone, Smitty. So long, everybody.